All right, Chapter 2 is called Methods of Research. With this chapter, we are going to be discussing all the different methodologies of collecting sociological research. And of course, there's more than one, because if there was only one, then everything would work out really great. But there's always some disadvantages and advantages of each of the methods. All right, we're going to first talk about Emil Durkheim. And he was a sociologist that thought, why can't we apply the scientific method to behaviors and help solve some of society's issues or problems? So knowing what the scientific method is, it's clearly used in sciences. That's why it's called a scientific method. But remember, sociology, the suffix of ology means that it is a study or science. And this is an approach that uses an objective opinion, an orderly procedure, so that you can come to an accurate conclusion. And so with that, it doesn't involve any personal opinions, it's not randomness, it's very precise science. And again, it's used in all sciences. Primary research is using research or facts that were specifically researched by the researcher, him or herself. No one else has ever collected those. So if I wanted to know information about the favorite color of everybody in this class, no one has ever collected that research before, I would be using primary research. Secondary research is gathering facts and research that were already collected by other people. For example, if I wanted to know the average GPA of all the people in this class, I would go to the office, find the GPAs for everyone in this class, and then do an average. So I'm using statistics or numbers that was already gathered and created by the office. And so therefore that's called secondary research. Durkheim used secondary research in his quest to use the scientific method to solve society's problems. It's important that we use factual data that is observable, measurable, and testable. In other words, it's something that you can see, it's something that we can quantify, and it's something that we can do over and over again. All right, the 5 steps in the scientific method. These you might already know from a previous science class. They might be worded slightly different, but in essence they're the same thing. The first step is to define the problem. What is your issue, your idea, your problem, your concern for you wanting to do this sort of research? And again, it can be anything. And you're going to be doing some research individually in a participant observation, which you will define the problem. And this time, it's not really going to be a problem more than just an idea or a concern. We're also going to do this as a group and do another method of research that, again, it might be a problem with why are there so many students getting D's and F's in our school? Or why don't people participate in extracurricular activities to the level as they once used to? So you could come up with these different problems. Now, when you come up with your idea for your research, you need to come up with both dependent variable and an independent variable or independent variables. The dependent variable is the subject that you are studying, okay? So if I want to study why so many students are getting D's and F's, that's my dependent variable. Grades of students in the 2014-2015 school year. Grades might change depending on my independent factors, which we haven't talked about yet. So realize this behavior may or may not change depending on something I'm looking at or something I might do. Durkheim studied suicide and suicide frequency. So what I have in bold there is what applies to Durkheim's study, so you can maybe understand this. But realize we did dependent variable on our participant observation sheet as well, and that was whatever class you were studying, it was that class's behavior. That's what your dependent variable was. Your independent variable, or independent variables, usually, are factors that will will start the change or cause the change of the dependent variable. Okay? So in essence, these things are going to affect the behavior. And for Durkheim, he used social forces. What you have to realize is the independent variable will never change. If you're going to look at gender, males or females, applying to grade point average, you're always going to look at if they're a boy or a girl. The behavior is grade point average. The independent variable is gender. And so you're always going to look at gender, and that's never going to change. But what might change is the level of their GPAs. So social forces that Durkheim used were they married or not? Were they religious or not? Were they involved in the military or not? Socioeconomic status, those sorts of things were his social forces that he was looking at to see if they changed the rate of suicide. So once you have this problem or issue or concern that you're going to do with, and you've broke it down into dependent variable and independent variables, now you need to form a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess. So knowing what you know about that particular behavior, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think your research is going to show you? Now you might be way off base or you might be right on, and that's okay. But you need to go with your gut, go with your experience, go with your previous knowledge. Durkheim's hypothesis was suicide would vary by religion, by marital status, by military or civilian status, and by economic status. And for us today, this kind of seems like a no-brainer. We clearly know that those factors change the rate of suicide. But in Durkheim's time, they believed that suicide was a mental illness, and so it had nothing to do with your religion or marital status or if you were in the military or not, or the economic situation that you were living in. So this seems like a no-brainer for us, but at this period of time, it really was a new idea. All right, and the most time-consuming, of course, is the third step, where you're going to be collecting your data, collecting your research. For your participant observation, those are the 5 days that you are going to observe your class. So that took you 5 days. It took you a matter of minutes to come up with your independent variable, dependent variable, and hypothesis. But now you're going to start collecting data. And you're going to use a variety of methods. Like I said, you've already started the participant observation, and later on we're going to do one of the other methods, such as a survey interview or a survey questionnaire or a natural observation or an experiment. When Durkheim was using secondary research documents, he started looking at his data and started noticing some patterns. As you're collecting the data, excuse me, you might find that you're going to start seeing some patterns. So after day 2 or day 3 of your participant observation, you may start to recognize, oh, look, these people always act like this, or on days like this is the behavior. So he found out that Protestants committed more suicide than Catholics, and Jews had the lowest rate of suicides. So there's the religion. He found out that single people committed suicide at a higher rate than people that were married, and of the married people, it was even lower if they had children. Soldiers committed suicide at a higher rate than regular civilians, and the highest was in bad economic times and lower in economic boom periods. The fourth step is analyzing the data. Okay, once you get this, now Durkheim kind of started analyzing that data as he was collecting it, which you certainly may do, but when you get it all in, now you're going to look at it, you're going to create some statistics. 80% of the time this happened, 4 out of 10 times this happened. So you're going to interpret it and explain it. When Durkheim analyzed his data, he found out that there were 3 different kinds of suicide. One was egoistic, and egoistic is where individuals do not have a strong bond to a social group. My example of that is Romeo and Juliet. They were not supported by the family unit. Their families didn't support their love and their romance with one another, so therefore they committed suicide. Altruistic suicide is the second kind of suicide that Durkheim came up with his analysis. And this is where individuals are completely opposite of egoistic. They are deeply committed to a group and their ideas. So the kamikaze pilots of Japan knew that they were on a suicide mission when they were flying their planes into the buildings and targets, but they were doing it for a cause, for Japan to win. And the third type of suicide that Durkheim came up with was anomic. And this comes down to there's a breakdown in your normal day-to-day routines. You become confused. What your life was like before seems aimless and purposeful-less. And what your previous goals were kind of meaningless. Now, my example is cut off at the bottom, but my example is the stock market crash. When there was the stock market crash in the 80s, for example, a lot of people committed suicide simply because they thought, well, I'm not going to have any money when I retire. Everything that I've done, I've saved for is gone. I have no help when it comes to retirement. I don't see an end in sight. I'm going to be working the rest of my life, and therefore I commit suicide. Now, this analysis is way more detailed than I expect you to do for your data. What I want you to do is just give me the most of the time this happened, or only one time this happened. Girls tended to act like this. Boys acted like this. On Mondays, they behaved like this. On Tuesdays, they behaved like this. I just simply want you to give me a more generic analysis of your data. And the fifth step is forming a theory. Now, this is a logical explanation of how some facts are clearly related to other facts. In other words, it's not your thoughts, it's not your educated guess anymore. Based on what you have in front of you, your research, your analysis, your statistics, your data, what is clearly going on here? And Durkheim decided that his theory was that suicide is related to the links or connections that people have with different groups. Your theory, again, may be exactly like your hypothesis, or it may be completely different. And either way, you're still researching.